now. All the pressure's on now. All right. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 929/20, this meeting will be held by virtual teleconference only with no physical location. Spoken comments by computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 96561891491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on raise hand. When called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted. Spoken comments using a smartphone will also be accepted through the Zoom mobile application. To offer comments using a regular phone, called 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 96561891491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click *9 on your phone so that we know you wish to speak. Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
That is very impressive.
It's recorded now. I can't get over it. Right. Can we get can we get a call to order, a roll call?
Yes, Chair Thompson.
Present.
Vice Chair Lee.
Present.
Board Member Bolte.
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Oral communications. The public may speak on an item not on the agenda.
Chair Thompson, we do not have any oral communications.
Okay, great. City official reports.
Yes, thank you. So if we have, let's see, sorry. So you can see that our schedule, we did have some cancellations in August. We're here today. We're going to have the retreat again on September 9th. Well, that'll be at 10 a.m. Because we'll be using the Zoom after the HRB. And then because of all of that, September 16th has been canceled. And then come October, we may or may not be in person. We're not sure yet. We're letting the council take the lead on that. So I will let you know as I have more information. And then next just shows the retreat items that we would be talking about. This sort of our first discussion about the ARB awards. I will try my best that when we have the second discussion about the ARB awards that we are in person, because that we will want a little more back and forth to decide, who's going to get those awards. But that'll be part of a second discussion. And then we'll also be discussing just sort of what is high quality development, so we can all kind of come to a common understanding. I think we have it for the most part, but we can further refine that. So thank you.
The agenda for that with, I guess, so there under that bracket, there's more information, like more questions and things to discuss. And that'll get sent out to everybody later this week. Tomorrow.
Yes, there's a handful of questions that go with that sort of high quality development question, and those will be in the agenda that'll be in your packet the week ahead.
Okay, and if any of the other board members would like to add anything to the agenda or have any questions, let me know. Okay, great. So I guess that brings us to the study session. We have, let's see, as requested by Mr. Summer, this is a discussion on the color of one pole located within the University Avenue Caltrain station. And I think we'll hear from the city first, and then Mr. Summer has a presentation, and then we can chat or discuss it within the board.
Yes, thank you. Let me pull up my presentation here. There it goes. Okay. All right. So yes, we're talking about the University Avenue Caltrain station and the color of the electrification poles there. So the discussion topic, as noted in Mr. Summers' letter that's attached to your staff report, he's concerned with the colors at the University Avenue Caltrain station that were recently installed. He's especially concerned about the poles that he can see from his upper floor residential unit. And in the photo here, you can see the tan building of the Palo Alto station, and that was the color that we were trying to replicate or be compatible with. And so next is just some background about the electrification of Caltrains included the installation of nearly 200 poles in the Palo Alto area. This is a Caltrain Joint Powers Board project and therefore outside of the city's jurisdiction. Environmental review for the project included a requirement to receive feedback from neighboring cities, but only required the Joint Powers Board to get a recommendation. They still retain jurisdiction. In 2019, the Joint Powers Board for Caltrain presented pole colors to the city's HRB and ARB for a total of 3 public hearings. The HRB recommended the tan colored poles at the University Avenue station to match the historic station buildings. And so there's a little bit of clutter in the front, but in the back, you can see the tan station and the tan pole in front of it. This recommendation was supported by the ARB. However, the ARB recommended different colors, green and black elsewhere. So more recently, starting in September of 2020, Mr. Summer contacted Caltrains with his request to repaint the poles so they were not as visible from his residence. In December of 2020, Mr. Summer continued his discussions with Caltrains and also copied City Council with the idea that Council might be willing to help pay for any recoating that would be necessary. Because the poles cannot just be repainted in place. They likely need to be taken down and recoated. In February of 2021, Caltrain stated that they were not comfortable taking down the poles, even if the expense was paid by someone else, because of the precedent that it would create and liabilities and some contract issues that it may present. That Caltrain gave that information directly to Mr. Summer. Separately, the city manager communicated that decision with council. So while it doesn't, I'm not excited to say this, but it is staff's opinion that the ARB's opportunity to review the pole colors has passed. The electrification of Caltrain is a Joint Powers Board project and therefore outside of city jurisdiction. So thank you. I know that Mr. Summer has a presentation as well, so I will stop sharing here.
Thank you. Mr. Summer, I'll put 10 minutes on, but if you go a couple minutes over, I'll keep that in mind.
I appreciate that. I've gone through the presentation twice and it comes up as 12 minutes. So I appreciate you hanging in there. So my first, I just want to note that the poles are technically scheduled to be repainted every 10 years. Just to clarify the idea of taking them down to repaint, they are scheduled to be repainted. So what I plan on doing today is first, I want to do a quick correction on your ARB report here. And then what I plan on doing is stepping through mine very quickly and just emphasize a few points. So the first correction is it's not one pole, it's 11 poles at the station. And that fits into both the title and the discussion topic. It's one pole directly in front of my place, but there's 11 poles at the station that I believe should be repainted. So, and also historically, I've gone through all the documentation and presentations. Even early EIR discussions were to minimize the virtual impact for the property, and not the virtual impact, visual impact on the property. And I just think that's important to keep in mind while we go through this discussion. So Excuse me. Okay. Okay. So the first question is, why am I here? And again, what I'm going to do is go through my report. I'm sure all of you have read it, but I just want to emphasize a number of points. So the first question is, why am I here? I discussed this issue with outside legal counsel, and their advice was to first attempt to gain support from the ARB, the Architectural Review Board. Second, with that support, gain support from the City Council, and then with that support, ask the City Council to request Caltrain to change the color during other work that they were doing on the electrification project. So in summary, on 2019, the ARB gave the recommendation for all of the stations to color specific, make the poles specific colors. Ultimately, I'm asking Caltrain to repaint 11 of the poles at the standard marine green color. My reasoning is that Jonathan Late in 2018 with the city of Palo Alto stated the goal is for the ARB to provide feedback on the color of the color selection with the intent that the poles can be better blended or fade into the background. Secondly, Brett Tyjet with Caltrain in 2019 in front of the ARB board said the center poles will be in a 35-foot range. Well, it turns out that neither of these two objectives were met. The beige poles do not blend with the natural green environment at the University Avenue station, and the 45-foot poles are 28% higher than what was presented to the ARB. And I believe that that's a significant enough change that it should have been brought back to the city for review. So I believe it's a mistake, and there's room for correction here. So I would like to step into the promise. This picture, which I'm sure all of you have seen, was the most publicly distributed picture of the electrified Caltrain at the University Avenue station. And if you notice, there are three things here. Number one, the electrical poles are dark. Secondly, the pole height is equal to the actual line height, the electrical line height. And third, the physical design of the poles is symmetrical from north to south lines. If we step into the process and then what the end result was, this picture on the left, which is an architectural design drawing, was presented to the ARB and the City Council many times, and it shows shorter poles, symmetrical north-south design. And what we ended up with is and I know it's a recommendation of the ARB, but we ended up with a light pole 30% higher than the actual contact wires and a unsymmetrical design from the north to south. And in my eyes, I think that's how do you say it? It's a disaster, catastrophe, sorry, for anyone that looks at the design of this. So you have to ask, the question, what happened? Well, the idea of actually blending the colors with the station versus the actual surrounding area, which is what Caltrain did for the rest of the environment, we ended up with colors completely out of sync. And what you see in these two pictures here, this just for reference, the picture on the top here is the center pole in the center of the University Avenue station. There are two others just like that. And the pole or the picture on the bottom are the 4 poles heading north into San Francisco. And there are 4 other poles just like them heading south into San Jose, with a total of 11 poles, sitting in what we are very proud of, a very green, landscape, Palo Alto landscape. So in essence, the beige poles matching the building do not match the surrounding area, and they also are not the standard marine green. And if the idea of actually matching it to the station, if you look at what happened at the California Avenue station, which is the picture on the left here, it has a tan station as well. but sure enough, there's a dark pole there. As a matter of fact, I believe these are black poles, and quite frankly, I think it blends pretty well with the environment. So the question is, how is this impacting the neighbors? There's three ways. It's a tremendous eyesore. The actual picture below is out of from my unit. We're 44 units sitting in this complex. It creates a tremendous eyesore. It creates a stressful environment that we live in, and it's lowering our property values. And just for a point of reference, if you think of the amount of effort that goes into blending cell towers, whenever groups like AT&T or Verizon come to town and want to put 5G cell towers in, these go into almost like multi-year studies of what color the poles should be and how high they should be. And it begs the question of why are city officials accepting this example on the Caltrain line, which cuts right through town. So the decision to make them beige, I think, completely missed the perspective of the homeowners, and they do not even match with the existing poles that are the light poles. Just real quickly, a number of years ago, we rebuilt the station, and there was a lot of work put in by City Council to actually select these light poles and what color. They're a gray, they're a standard industrial gray, and these beige poles are completely out of sync with the existing poles that are already at the station. So what can be done from here? At least three things. One is to replace the taller poles with the original 35-foot poles and make them beige to try to match the building. The second is to paint the top half of the 11 poles to simulate like a tree. The top half is green, the bottom half can be a beige. And the third option is to paint the entire all of the 11 poles marine green, just like most of the rest of the poles in the city. Before I go into the conclusion, it begs the question, are there other mistakes that are being made by Caltrain along the way, and are they correcting them? And the answer is yes. All you need to do is go to the California Avenue station, the northbound platform. They drilled a hole right in the middle of the platform. After they drilled it, they decided, no, we're not going to use that. And they put a single pole on the other side. And now what they're going to do is first they fill it with rocks, and they're going to come back and fill it with cement. So it was a poor mistake, but at least they're coming back and they're going to fix it. And I think the same applies here. So my ask of you to the ARB is, I'm asking the ARB and the city of Palo Alto to request Caltrain, or ask the city council to request Caltrain to paint the beige poles at the University Avenue station marine green. And that would be all 11 of them. And that would be something we could live with and be proud of in the future. And just for reference, this photo right here is the first pole out of the station heading north and to San Francisco. It's a marine green. I think it's a very attractive pole, and it blends very well with both the green trees and the blue sky. If you would like to see this in person, and I know there's the Brown Act, what you could do is you could create a 2-person ad hoc committee, and I invite you into my place and you can see it in person. Okay, that's it. That's what I have. Questions? Or should I stop sharing, or what should I do?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Please stop sharing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Summer.
Okay.
It was under 10 minutes. So, yeah.
Oh.
Does the board have any questions of staff or Mr. Summer? Not seeing any.
Can I ask a question, Osma?
Sure, go for it.
To the staff, were residents adjacent to the Caltrain line notified of our meetings when we were discussing this formally?
I will have to, I don't know that it was like a 600-foot notice, but it would have been an agenda item that was published in the paper.
So it was publicly notified that this was going to be a topic.
Yes, all ARB hearings are.
And how many public hearings did we actually have on this subject?
We had separately, we had one for the HRB, one for the ARB, and then a joint meeting.
And all those meetings are open to the public, right?
Correct.
So at any point during any of those meetings, this could have been brought to our attention.
Correct.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of the board or staff? Okay, well, I think we'll bring it to the board to discuss within the board. I see you have your hand raised, Mr. Summer. The way this usually goes is we'll chat about it, and then if we have any more questions, we can ask you. Typically, when the agenda is, the person who is presenting usually has their 10 minutes, and then we'll chat, and if we'd like to open it up again, we will. Alrighty, who wants to go first? Alex?
Sure. So I will just disclose that I did look at all of the polls from San Antonio up to University Avenue. I did that yesterday, and I think I'm generally comfortable with the decision that the ARB made previously. I had, if you go through the minutes, I did have reservations about the beige color, and I still do. But I don't think it's better. Well, let me say one thing. Is generally, I think I agree that generally that the dark green or black is the right color for like utility poles. But that being said, there are lots of unpainted traffic signal lights. A lot of the new Cobra head lights are all unpainted. They're all over the city, and somehow that those are acceptable. I don't think they look that great, but they're all out there. Generally, I think the green is a good color. I did look at the black at the Cal Avenue station. I think that looks really good. They blend in with the existing light fixtures there. And then I did look at the University Avenue station, and I did look at the existing row of trees between the for the condominium building on Alma and the station. And I'm not sure that going to green at the University Avenue station makes sense. I think it'll probably stand out. I don't think that those lights have to be the beige that matches the building, but I think the green presents another problem. So I think my thought is to just leave everything as is. An alternate could be like a dark gray for all of the poles at the University Avenue station. That would help blend them in with the existing light fixtures. But then again, I do think I agree with the staff is that we don't really have any leverage over the state on this one. I think maybe the only thing that we could do is if there is this repainting schedule, that they be changed at that time. But it doesn't. The repainting schedule seems to me to be kind of problematic because these are powder coated. And I think generally painting like a powder coated doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think that the initial powder coating should last longer than 10 years. So that's where I'm on this one. I'm curious to see what the rest of the board has to say on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Wu. I'd like to go next.
Go next.
Oh, go for it, Grace.
So I guess on my side, I'm more concerned about this process. Overall, I mean, just to be brief, I appreciate the time. I appreciate, that there are folks that felt necessary to open this discussion again, and I appreciate the comments. I believe staff is right on. There were 3 public meetings, HRB and ARB, and I wasn't on the board at that time. And this was November 2018 and January 2019. And I'm not sure if it's my place to actually have an opinion or voice it at this time. We do have this process where boards are given the opportunity to make a decision. And in this case, this is really not the city's decision. It's a recommendation from 2 boards, multiple meetings to discuss this. And I believe the HRB, just if we did want to go into it, had some comments related to the historic nature of the specific site. Definitely have opinions on poles, and I understand being an owner myself of property and views. However, I don't think it's in my place to choose a color at this time, or really to discuss it beyond, my opinion that there were sufficient meetings. They did come to a decision, and I'm not sure if we want to reopen this. I do question the precedent that this begins to the question of precedent. So on multiple levels. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Board Member Lee. Who'd like to go next? Board Member Bolte?
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Yes, I'm happy to address this. I see two issues here. Really, the question of process, Grace, I think is important. Mr. Sommer, you had 3 opportunities to bring these issues to our attention. And then even further than that, you had opportunity to come to the board informally before pressing us for this formal hearing. So I really question the process. If everybody, every time they don't like an ARB decision, presses for this, it seems to set a bad precedent. And especially when your particular issue is relating to a very unique perspective that you have, which is very unique to your situation and a few of the people living in higher buildings close to the railroad. Because my second thought, and my most important thing, is I think the ARB's decision on this was correct to begin with. I think the poles that are close to that station, from most people's perspective, down on foot, walking around the station, blend in better by being the tan color. I've gone out again recently just to check that thought. I remember doing so at the time that we made this decision. Because of this hearing, I went out and checked again, as Alex did, and I agree with our original decision. Those poles are better blending for most people being the tan color. So ultimately, I support our original decision. And I really think that the mistake that was made is that you didn't participate in this hearing earlier, where you would have had a chance to voice this opinion. I don't think it would have changed our position, but at least you would have had an opportunity and felt heard about it at the time. That's what I think about this. Thank you.
Board Member Bolte. Board Member Hirsch?
Right. Well, listening to fellow board members, yeah, the process was very well vetted in the first time around, and probably has passed like the train going through the station. So I wasn't really that active at the time. I was on the board for the finals on that, and I think that I didn't voice too much of an opinion at the time because I wasn't feeling comfortable with the process of speaking up so much. But at this point, I guess just in reflection, I would have probably looked for a different opinion on the actual pole colors, although it's true that there's some reasoning in the trying to make the poles identified with a station by color. I think that the systems like this almost demand their own treatment. When you look at the pole today and you look at the branches off of the top of it, and the idea of the pole itself being painted one color and stand out relative to those elements and the wires, etc. My preference would have actually been either the dark green, which almost looks black from some locations, or to make it a totally neutral color that has to do with the electrification system itself. But this is an aesthetic discussion, and well beyond the fact that the train has gone through the station and the decision has been made, and to get to actually look at this with the thought that it would authorize a repainting of all those poles is just difficult to imagine. And I couldn't make that recommendation at this time. However, I studied the paint issue a little bit, and it would be a difficult process to repaint them. You wouldn't have to take them down. You could sand them, and from what I read on a Google search was that you could sand it down and repaint it. You couldn't spray paint it. It wouldn't work that way, but you could hand paint it. Sounds like a hell of a job to be done. So I think the better course is to just live with it. I have one other comment, just generally, yes, about the sort of the personal nature of this for Mr. Sommer. I don't agree that it's changes the value of your unit in any way. Somebody who's going to come into your unit is not going to look out the window and say, what is that ugly pole doing there? I won't buy this unit. So some of your assumptions about that are really a little beyond possibility. And the poles themselves, yes, they stick up in the landscape, I agree, and that's unfortunate, but we see a lot of that everywhere around the city. Poles are, utilities are that sort of thing. And so you recognize the fact that you're that close to the railroad and the railroad goes through there. Your one view is not the only view. And so therefore the ground level view has some validity too, and the relationship to the station has validity. And if you look at all of those different situations, I think you come to the conclusion that a utility like this has to sort of find its ways through the urban environment, and it will affect the nature of that environment in some way. Happens all over. It's nicer, I'll agree, in neighborhoods where you have wooden poles, but in some cases, metal poles do exist there as well. So both for process, because it's already trained out of the station, and for aesthetics, even if I kind of could agree with you that a darker pole would be better for your landscape view, I don't think that there's any merit in making changes at this time.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. And I guess I'll speak really briefly as to my take on this. Really appreciate the board members' perspectives, and I really appreciate Mr. Sommer coming to us and explaining his point. I actually was absent for that one hearing where it was ruled on. In general, it's interesting as I'm sort of going through Palo Alto and seeing Caltrain put up their electrification stuff. Part of me somewhat regrets a little bit, maybe not putting a little bit more pressure on some of the other things that I had a chance to review. It's definitely a new look. It's a new look, the electrification. There's a lot of poles, there's a lot of wires, and that is kind of the consequence of electrification, which ultimately is supposed to be better for our environment. So I agree with most of what the board members have said so far. We obviously don't have any jurisdiction to reopen this item, re-recommend anything. It appears that a good number of the board members here wouldn't support changing the color. I also kind of believe that the public realm is really where most people will be experiencing this. And so I don't know that I would support a change as well. I really appreciate everyone having a chance to discuss this. I know sometimes it's not always, it's hard to please everybody in some of these circumstances, especially with architecture. Sometimes that it'll be great for some and not great for others. So
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Will I be able to give my response to your comments just very briefly?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I saw that you had your hand up and I was gonna give you 3 minutes at the end, but I wanted to check if there was any other last comments from the board before we give a chance to ask Mr. Sommer to make any closing remarks. Okay, go for it, Mr. Sommer.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I took some notes. So so 4 of them actually, and this won't take 3 minutes. The first one is looking at this, similar to what you just said, I don't believe it was a foreseen issue. It was hard to imagine. I think when you put poles up just in tree green areas, you can say, yeah, that'll match the trees, but to have the foresight to see it from above or from the higher units in there, I don't think it could have been foreseen. So what I'm asking for is a recommendation to actually correct the issue. And the weight of that isn't excessive amount other than the ability to take it to the city council and say the ARB has made this recommendation. The second, regarding the notices, I've been involved with the Caltrain high-speed rail from the beginning. As a matter of fact, I'm literally the person that came up with the blended approach. It was at the Cubberley Center a number of years ago, and that has taken traction. And we now have 2 tracks going through town versus an elevated 4-track structure. So I believe that hard problems can be fixed. And honestly, I mean, that's what I do on a daily basis, is solve hard problems. The point is that the notices at that point were going out for these type changes. And technically this actually fits in the 600-foot realm. I get notices about the 600-foot realm all the time. I did not get notices for this. Thirdly, I would say that 2019, 2020, and there's no excuses in life, but we lost 2 family members during that time, from COVID. And they were both in Europe. My wife's from Europe, and it was a very difficult time. So, you know, the fourth one is people do buy based on view. When I came into my place, I said, wow, what a view. And the view is worth a lot more than the 825 square feet that real estate that I purchased. And to actually put a eyesore in front of this does have inherent value. So those were my only comments. You know, thank you. Yeah, we'll just have to take it from here.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will close this item. Move on to our next action item, which is 555 Middlefield. So this is a recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a minor board level architecture review and design enhancement exception to allow for modifications to the facade of an existing medical office building and other minor site improvements. And I'll hand it over to staff.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Give me 1 moment while I share my screen. There we go. All right, so today's staff has brought before everyone both the architectural review board, an application for minor architectural review and design enhancement exception. The subject site is located in the Crescent Park neighborhood at 555 Middlefield Road. It is zoned for RM30 for medium density multifamily. The existing site has a grandfathered medical office use. The building was constructed for office use in 1956 and has remained largely unaltered since its construction. The property does have a variance on record for the building's encroachment into the special 24-foot setback along Middlefield Road. When calculating, because the building is over 50 years old and there is a discretionary review application on file, the site was evaluated for any historic significance. The building was determined not individually eligible for the California Register of Historic Resources by the city's contracted consultant. So as you can see, the existing building lot layout has remained largely unaltered since its construction. The building footprint, the landscaped areas, the parking layout are comparatively the same in the photo taken from 1965 in the top left and today's conditions. The applicant proposes to renovate the building facade with minor fenestration changes and new exterior finishes. The cantilevered second level floor will be refreshed with a skim coated cement plaster and painted a feather white. The eave overhangs will be removed and the second level building face extended by a parapet to match the existing height of the low sloped gable roof ridge. The first level CMU block siding will remain and will be painted a darker tone. The exterior building improvements include replacement of all the perimeter windows and exterior doors, with some modification to the size of the openings and removal of all through wall AC units. Within the original eave line, the second level windows at the east, south, and west facing sides will have a brise-soleil detail. The site will also benefit from new landscaping, primarily located at the front of the building, new pedestrian pavers, a new freestanding address sign, new short-term and long-term bicycle parking, new covered trash area are all proposed improvements in the project scope. The project includes a new accessible lift system located within the exterior court that would transport individuals from the ground floor to the second level balcony. Additionally, the new code compliant ADA van parking stalls and accessible path are proposed. No changes to the building footprint, interior layout, parking circulation, or use are proposed. The new parapet requires the application to file the design enhancement exception because of the existing grandfathered medical office use on site. The code specifies that a DEE may be granted for items such as a parapet under the circumstance that it would not result in an increase in FAR or decrease the amount of required parking on site, as well as decrease the amount of required landscaping. And the application would not result in any of the aforementioned. For context, these are photos of the existing site conditions. The building fenestration pattern will remain mostly the same as existing. The existing eave, as indicated with the red dashed line over here, is what's going to be removed. The shadowed red area indicates the new parapet around the existing roof edge. The parapet will extend the second level face to the existing 20-foot roof ridge line, and the existing roof form will remain the same, which is indicated with the dashed blue line in the elevation. For context, this is a side-by-side of the existing conditions and the proposed changes. The existing street trees are to remain, and new landscaping will be planted primarily at the front of the building, as well as a new long-term bicycle parking area, which is in the right rear corner of the lot. The proposed project complies with the development standards except with respect to the permitted changes for grandfathered use, which is why the DEE is sought. A DEE application would not be necessary if the site had a permitted land use. The proposed parapet complies with the maximum height and daylight plane for the RM30 zoning. However, it's because the site has the existing grandfathered use that the DEE is required to be processed to increase the height and change a building envelope. So staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board take the following actions to recommend approval of the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant Randy Pop has prepared a short presentation and is here to answer questions as well as the property owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the applicant, I had forgotten to ask the board for any disclosures. Any disclosures, Board Member Malte?
Yes, I'll disclose that I visited the site earlier this week. I did not notice a public sign on the site at the time that I visited it. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Liu?
Yeah, I visited the site and also I looked at the color board. And my recollection is I did see an ARB notification on the site on Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Hirsch?
Visited the site. It's just around the corner, so it was easy. And visited the panel at City Hall.
Thank you. Board Member Lee?
I also visited the site.
And I have nothing to disclose. Can we go and hear from the applicant? I see that Randy is on. I will put 10 minutes on the clock. We're not able to hear anybody if anybody is currently speaking.
Okay, I think I'm all set.
Okay, all right.
All right, so before I get started, I'd like to introduce my team. I've got Christian Hansen here, who is one of the partners at Wheatley Properties, and Paul Lettieri, who is our landscape architect for this project. Christian has a couple of quick comments to make, and then I'll jump into the presentation.
Not many comments, just thank you for taking the time. We recently purchased this building, and we're just trying to give it some new life and extend the life of the building. It has pretty good bones, and we're just trying to beautify it a little bit. So that's our goal, and I think that Danielle's done a great job. And we weren't going to add some of the things. We didn't plan to add all the things that have shown up with regard to landscaping and other things, but I think Danielle's done a good job kind of working with us, and we feel like we have a pretty good budget conscious product now. So thank you for allowing us the time to present this to you.
All right, so good morning, board. Nice to see you all again. And Osma, I'll just mention really briefly that I completely enjoyed your introduction this morning. That was terrific. We should have more of that. All right, so listen, this is actually in the scope of work that I do. This is a pretty simple project. Our goal here is to extend the life of this building, and we want to do that by making the repairs that are necessary and have been neglected for a long time, and at the same time refresh it and update the look a little bit, make it something that is interesting for tenants, and hopefully gets filled up because it's just immediately off of University Avenue. It's part of our downtown, and having a building that's vacant because it's not attractive is not good for anyone. So, there's a whole series of items that we're tackling here. There's damaged stucco, there's inefficient windows that are not organized well, that have been changed over time. There's a color palette that we're not favorable for. There's site accessibility issues. There are parking issues. There's really no bike parking on the site. The landscape planting has been neglected for a long time. We need better lighting on the site. Currently, it's just a bunch of really awful lights that are out there. And then doing some improvements for site signage and energy. And this idea of adding a short parapet to align with the existing ridge is just part of that concept. So, this is the goal. At the end of the day, it's much more attractive, we think, cleaner look. By the time we do this, birds will be flying by and flowers will be blooming and everything will look great. So just really briefly, the major improvements that we're working on here are an electrical upgrade. We are planning to do some pretty significant landscape improvements and add bike parking. There's a trash covering that goes over the area where trash always existed, and we're going to correct a non-conforming accessible stall so that it complies. And then for the building itself, very little in terms of actual physical changes to the building other than finishes. So the first is that the main window that actually exists over the entryway is not centered. There are a couple of doors that front out towards Middlefield Road that don't have stoops and are, in our opinion, confusing and distracting from where the main entrance should be. As Danielle has described so clearly, the finishes are ready. I won't go into that too much other than to say that it really is our intention to use a nice clean stucco finish, smooth trowel, paint the base of the building, preserving the CMU block, and then replacement of the windows so that there's a consistency in the order and the fenestration and the language that those speak. I think one of the things that had occurred over time is that a number of AC units had been placed in windows where the Jalous glass was, so pieces had been removed, and it's just sort of fallen apart over time, and our goal is to put it back together. Again, on the side of the building, just very simple changes. But this is where you'll really see the impact of the add of the parapet. And part of our reasoning for adding this parapet is not only to update the look of the building and make some change, but also to conceal some of the ductwork that exists on the back of the building. We intend to place ductwork on the front portion of the building as well. The distribution of ductwork on the roof is a result of having virtually no attic space and very low ceilings at the second level. So all of the ductwork is roof mounted. We intend to provide some roof screening around the mechanical units, and we'll extend the ductwork as shown in the roof plans that were included in your packet on the front of the building in the same way it is on the rear. And it's our expectation that the parapet will help to cover that. I will say that we don't have an expectation it will fully cover it, because we have been restricted to essentially not increase the nonconformance of this building. And so, that might be something that we could ask the board to weigh in on. Our parapet is aligned with the existing ridge, and we have an opportunity to make that go higher. We have chosen not to put a roof screen around the entire building because we think that would be a dramatic and less desirable way to approach this. For all of the years that I can find Google history in the views, this is the corner where the trash has been kept. And we've had a lot of interaction with the green waste folks, and they're fine with it staying in that corner, but they wanted to have a covering. And so we've devised this small and efficient little cover area that some portion of it extends over a parking space, but it's acceptable to green waste in the way that it does that. And our goal is to just have a little bit of fencing to make it so that people can't see the trash as it's being stored in that area. Piece of our project here is the signage that we'd ask you to weigh in on. We are creating a monument sign that is closer to the street. The current sign that is back up against the face of the building has been obscured by bougainvillea, which we are removing, but it also partially blocks some windows. And we thought that having a monument closer to the street would be much more appropriate. And so we've designed that and asked for your input on that. We have Paul Lettieri here from the Gazzardo Partnership, and he's provided a really great set of images and a planting plan that I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at and may have some questions on. I won't go into that in detail at this point, but if you do want us to touch on any of that, he's available for comment and to respond to any questions you all might have. And so with that, I will complete our presentation and ask you to have your discussion, and we're available for any questions or responses that you might need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Chair Thompson, we currently do not have any public speakers for this item.
Okay. Do we have any questions of staff or the applicant by any members of the board?
I have two questions, Osmo, whenever you can let me talk about it.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, Architect Pop. Currently, there's a series of wall-mounted air conditioning units on the building. Are you proposing to remove those and provide central air conditioning?
That's correct. The units that are on the building now have capacity to serve the entire building, but because the ductwork wasn't installed to a number of the rooms in the building, those window-mounted units had remained in place. It's our intention to remove all of those and only do a centrally distributed system.
Thank you. The second question is regarding the ground floor secondary doors. In this image on my screen, on the right-hand facade of the building, to the left of the two gentlemen walking in the parking lot is a door, and there's one more further behind it. I don't see any sort of stoop on the exterior of those doors. Is that something you plan to address, or how is that issue resolved?
So this is an existing condition. I've had some conversation with David Chung in the building department about this because these are not primary doors. He didn't feel it was necessary for us to modify those because it would impact the parking. They're really just emergency exit doors that aren't even required for emergency exit. And so it's our intention to just leave those as they are unless there's a building comment that David decides he wants to enforce, and then we'll make whatever modifications are necessary.
If you are required to add stoops, wouldn't that affect quite a bit of the parking arrangement?
Well, we're hopeful that we'll be able to gain some type of an exception where we can just do a step rather than a stoop in that location. The door doesn't swing out, it swings in. And so in that case, you're only required to have a step and not a stoop. So we're working with him to blend that a little bit. And the nose of the car will certainly extend over a stoop if it goes there. And because the parking is angled, there's pretty ample space to get in and out of those doors if necessary.
Thank you. Those are my
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you. Board Member Liu, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. So one is the existing iron gates. I think that the plans say that those are going to be retained. And I was wondering if there are code and accessibility issues with keeping those. Second question.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just read all the questions. Second question is on the new monument sign. You're showing that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, I can't hear you.
Alex,
Sorry.
We lost you after you said the new monument sign.
Yeah, can you hear me? Because I think I'm not muted.
Yeah, we can now. Thank you.
Yeah, it
Okay.
all of a sudden went on mute. So maybe just repeat starting with the monument sign item.
Spacebar. Okay, so the second was on the monument sign. Is if you had considered having that perpendicular to the street versus having it parallel. Third question is the materials board showed a wood cedar, unfinished cedar wood siding, wood sample, and I didn't see a detail for the fences. And then I think my last question is on the planter strip along the curb. I think I saw two notes. One was that area was going to be mulched, and then I also saw symbols that would be planted with a manzanita Pacific mist. And I was wondering if that's either or both.
Great. So I'll address the first three, and I'll have Paul Lettieri jump in for your last question. So in regard to the gate, yes, we are intending to maintain the existing gate. We will modify that as necessary in order to manage leverage force for that, keeping it to accessible limitations. And the hardware that's on that is going to be modified to be compliant. It's a deterrent. It's not meant to be a high security barrier, and it's part of the character of the original building, and the owners felt it was important to maintain that, and so that's our intent there. But we will make some modifications in terms of potentially adding an assistance opener up at the top of it to help pull it open if necessary. But honestly, they move pretty easily. I know that they're locked right now, but I've been in and out of those many times, and they actually, for their age and for what they're built out of, they move very efficiently. We talked a little bit about rotating the sign, and I'm open to your advice about this. We felt that having it oriented the direction that we placed it was more aesthetically aligned with the building rather than rotating it. It felt like it was going to be much more dominant if it was rotated, but open to discussion about that. And I'd like to hear what any of the board would say. I always appreciate the collaboration. In regard to the cedar, that is only for the the trash enclosure. It's really just some plank siding that will go around the trash enclosure, and it's so simple. It's going to literally just be attached to the steel with screws. That's all it is, and we want it to just weather in place. And so I didn't do a bunch of detailing there because it's literally just wood siding applied to the metal with some screws, and we'll leave it at that. Let me ask Paul Lettieri to jump in, and I can step back to his images.
I'm here. Good morning, everyone. You know, on the topic of the sign, one of the considerations we had was that when you turn it perpendicular, it kind of, the field of view for that sign becomes a lot bigger. So it has more impact on the planting, you know, trying to keep the planting low so you can see the sign. And we thought it was maybe a little bit more pedestrian oriented, turned the other way so that the rest of the landscape doesn't have to respond to like a sight distance triangle for a sign. That was part of our consideration for that. The other point, we've had confusion about this mulch and planting along the street. The answer to your question is both. On L3.1 in the set, there's a note down by the driveway entrance that says that it's planting and mulch. This came up as a plan check comment. I think for some reason our labeling has just not been very clear about that. So yeah, it's down at the bottom of the screen there, just below one of the existing trees out in the street. I don't know if you can see it with the zoom windows in the way, but anyway, that's what's happening there.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks. Are there any other questions of the applicant or staff?
Yes, I do.
Go for it, David.
Thanks for the presentation. This is going to certainly increase the quality of this building.
This is just questions, David.
Yes. The lighting of the parking area, could you address that? I have a couple of other questions. The roof drain, I don't see it indicated on the outside of the building. Where is it? Where are they going? There's a tree that's for the landscape people. I think it's a tree. One of the trees was recommended for replacement, or at least it appears to require that. So you might address that issue. And a similar question as to Peter's about the door to the exterior, not understanding exactly why it's sort of a blanked out issue, but now that it is explained, I understand it better. Those are my 4 questions. Well, let's say 3 questions, 1 answered.
Okay, so in regard to the lighting, we have just included under soffit lighting that will occur under the cantilever of the building that goes around the building for just sort of general nighttime lighting. We're quite aware of some residential neighbors that are behind us. We have a fence that should help that. There's quite a bit of foliage back there, but it was our intention to try and keep the level of light toward those neighbors and towards the street quite concealed. We did add some lighting on this side of the building that will be at the front and rear. These are the RAB lights that have a very controlled and tailored light dispersion. In your packet, of course, is the photometric, and you can see that the light level, when it gets to the fence on this side of the parking lot, gets down to like a 0.6 at the most at the ground plane, and by the time you're up at the 4 or 4.5 foot high fence that occurs on that side, it will be at a 0.1. And so we think that the lighting that will come off of those will be very controlled, but it's also quite necessary, we feel, in terms of providing safety and security for the site. This is intended to be a medical office building, most likely will be occupied by therapists or other people who might have clients who are coming late in the evening. And so security is a concern at the site. That's part of why we've maintained the gates, and we've put quite a bit of attention into the lighting itself. Initially, we had these lights mounted just a little bit higher but after studying the photometric, dropped those down in order to achieve the cutoff that we were seeking. In terms of the roof drains, you are correct. That's a level of detail that I think we haven't fully represented on the drawings at this point, but the intention is to have an internal drain at the second level that will exit the building underneath the cantilevered overhang, and we will just have a round downspout leader that drops down to a splash block and drops out to the landscape area. So our goal is really to have those just be painted out and to match the darker color at the base of the building, not be visible up at the top. And then I will let Paul talk about the question about the tree. It's not my understanding that there are any trees being removed at the street front, but I'll let him jump in here.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. I'm not aware of any trees, any street trees that were recommended to be removed. There may be a neighbor tree, that one on the upper right there, there's a xylosma that's just above the trash, that might have been noted as not being the greatest tree, but it's not on our property. As far as I know, the street trees, I don't recall any of them being recommended to be removed. So we've preserved all of them.
Yeah, in our plan set currently, we are not showing any of those to be removed.
No.
I can jump in on behalf of staff. The reason for the tree replacement is there was originally 3 planters within that exterior corner, which if you look at Google view, there is some pretty dense canopy that was there. So for the no net loss canopy loss, those are the trees that we are replacing on site, since that land was removed, which is how up with the replacement of the 3 trees, which 2 are in the front and 1 is going to be in that back rear corner.
Yes.
Near the back.
And that's completely right. Those 3 trees that have the X's in them, it looks like trees to be removed. Those trees were gone before Wheatley Properties bought the site, and they were more overgrown shrubs, but they did have some canopy, so they are being mitigated and replaced. But there aren't any trees being proposed to be removed on the current site.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lee, do you have any questions?
I had a quick question, and I think it's for landscape. Thank you, Randy, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask the landscape. I'm a consultant in terms of the rendering. I know that that's outdated and doesn't match L3-1. In the rendering, however, there are more trees, not street trees, but I guess you have the desert moon proposed, and you have 2. I'm just wondering if there was a reason why there was not a desire to match the rendering in terms of a line of smaller trees along that frontage.
That's excellent observation. Yeah, we started out with 4 relatively small red buds, but one of the comments we got back was that those aren't really trees. and the Western red buds, it's one of these things where you could argue about that all you want. Is it really a tree? Is it a big shrub? So we had them as smaller size as the rendering shows. And then when we got into the mitigation aspect of it, we did not want to create a wall of trees in front of the building with because the California natives that we tried to find, there's not a lot of small scale trees that really are going to be inarguably trees that we thought would work. And our goal wasn't to block the whole building. So we decided to go to sort of with the 2 specimen trees that were going to go in larger boxes instead. That was the rationale.
I appreciate that. And I guess my only other question was regarding that trash enclosure fence, but I mean, I can save it to comments. Thanks.
Thanks. I actually did have a question about that. The trash enclosure, I wasn't able to find in the drawings. I saw in your presentation, you had sort of a depiction of what that looks like. Just wanted to get another view of it.
Well, I saw A1.1 for top left.
This rendering is not in the package. It's something that we had shared with staff as we were developing the drawing, and I just didn't put it in the package, but since I had it, I put it in the presentation for you.
I see it. Okay, thank you. That was my first question. The other question I had was for the metal roof screen, the corrugated metal roof screen for the mechanical. Um, in the, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go to City Hall, but in the packet material picture, I didn't see a picture of that. Can you give us an idea of how tight the corrugations are for that metal corrugated?
I'm going to say they're about 5-inch corrugations, 4 or 5-inch corrugations. It's pretty tight. It's intended to provide structural integrity for that material so that it can span and withstand wind load without distorting. So it's a pretty tightly corrugated material.
And is that going to be painted?
It comes pre-finished, and we had selected a color. I don't have that right in front of me quickly, but our intention is to have that be a silvery color so that it will tend to blend in with the sky.
Okay, thank you.
And just to provide some more detail of that, there is a photo of that material on the sheet A1.0, bottom left.
Oh, there it is in the corner. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, are there any other questions? Nope. Okay, well, thank you. We'll bring it back to the board. Who'd like to go first? Any volunteers? Board Member Bolte?
Sure, happy to talk about this. Thank you, Architect Pop. I think this is a very good presentation, especially the street perspective. It really does capture the feeling of the building well. I think kudos to you. You've made a great design that is a definite improvement and it looks great. I have no issues recommending approval for this today. I'm pleased to hear that the wall AC units are being taken away, and I'll leave it up to your discretion how to figure out those door landings. But I do caution you that other medical buildings in Palo Alto have had issues with patients tripping on that situation, and then it really does cause blowback to you. So you may want to be sure you address that. I am concerned about the design of the trash enclosure not being as compatible with the building as I would like. I think that's something that could be solved through a subcommittee, but also eager to hear what my colleagues on the board think about it. I'm perfectly okay with the design enhancement exception. In fact, I think that's exactly what I call a textbook example of where it's very appropriate. It's a clear enhancement to the building. It's minor, it helps, and without the enhancement exception, you couldn't do it. It's a no-brainer to me that that should be allowed. I'm fine with the signage either as it is presented or rotated 90 degrees. And I think the landscaping is excellent, so I can recommend approval of everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bolte. Board Member Liu?
Sure. So thank you, Randy. I think the drawing set was very clear and your presentation was very good. I think my thinking was similar to Peter's. I think my only cautions were, that the existing street tree, the magnolia, seems to be very stressed, and I have seen people kill them when they try to re-landscape. They remove too many of the roots and when trying to put in the irrigation. So I just caution on that one. I presume that our city, like urban forestry, will review that. Two, on the sign, on the monument sign, I think I'm okay either way. It seems like you're trying to do it to have it like the least impact on the street, and I think that the way you have it is correct. I think that rotating it makes it more visible to drivers. And so I think that that's all that I think, and also on the landscape, I think that I did review all the plants with regard to our native plant finding, and I can make that recommendation as well, and I can support the DEE. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Liu. Board Member Hirsch?
Yes, thank you, Randy and landscaper for the presentation. both of those seem to be incredibly increased quality to this building, which is pretty much down on the seams all throughout both building and landscape at this point. I sort of register, and it's unfortunate that since it's the older code that there isn't more capability for planting around the perimeter and making it into a generally nicer environment than the kind of car building environment that it is. But this is the best you can do, and I think you have improved it tremendously. I'm appreciative of the explanation of the lighting because I felt that that was a significant aspect to the building, so that the form of the projecting element will be kind of reinforced by the fact that there'll be some perimeter lighting underneath it. That was a good decision, which really I didn't notice in the drawings, but I'm glad you explained it. And similarly, roof drain explanation. We really don't talk to the inner court idea, but I just want to make a comment that doesn't have to do with really our general comments, is that concerned about kind of the inner court lighting of the staircases that go to the second floor. I'd like you maybe to take a look at that to determine if it's going to be an adequate lighting for the nighttime to just have the one circular fixture in the middle. The window surrounds in the whole, not the window surround so much, but the windows themselves and the treatment with the other diffuse glazing seems like a nice improvement to that. But I do have some comments about the kind of eyelid treatment. It's not much of a solar control, and as an irregular item on the face of the building on only side and top, I'm personally bothered by that. I probably would prefer to have seen a canopy at the top of the window only. I don't understand how the side element really works at all. And it seems a little on the modest side relative to the shape of this building, that the eyelids could have been maybe on the top and expressed a bit more than what they are. Would sort of bring it into the modern realm a bit better than what is shown there. That's my opinion for that on one aspect, and nobody else has spoken to it, so perhaps it's just me. I would wish it were possible somehow where there's swale on the north side of the building to have that actually a planted area so that something could grow up the fence line. I know it's not an easy decision to do something there, and there may be not enough space for that, but it would certainly soften the relationship to the building next door. And certainly this building isn't comfortable on the edges, on the outer edges, in my opinion. I have a sort of a personal comment about windows on commercial buildings. I sort of mentioned it in a previous project that wouldn't it be nice if there were operable windows in most buildings, since we have really such great air 90% of the time here in California. I'm not used to that in New York. So, but it doesn't look like that's a possibility here. Everything is controlled and interior, and it just seems probably the system is not acceptable to that idea, but because it's separate uses in each of the rooms. But I would have liked to have seen that as a possibility. Signage, I agree with my fellow board members here that it seems appropriate where it is. If you turned it, it would be appropriate as well, certainly for the pedestrian, but I think it's a requirement for the building to have some signage, and I think that's it works the way it is. I agree with the landscape opinion that it interferes less with the landscape when it's in this direction. So overall, to talk about the change in the parapet idea that is essential here. One other aspect to this is that the rooftop elements that might be seen, they probably won't be seen except when you cross the street. Elevation drawings tend to show things that you really won't notice when you're far away. I think that probably it'll be okay to keep the height of the building where it is and not have to worry about that, because from most perspective views, you won't see that machinery at all. It's held back from the face of the building. So the one point I would like to re-emphasize is really to consider the possibility of a different form of canopy for the upper windows instead of that kind of an eyelid. Unless I'm looking at it wrong, but it seems to me it's a solid element only on one side, and then it's over the top as well. And that doesn't look appropriate to me. But thank you. The fact that you've changed the shape of the roof line is a substantial improvement to this building, and I look forward to this improvement in the neighborhood I live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Vice Chair Lee.
Thank you for bringing this application. I think it will be an immense improvement. I have very small comments and happy to support the DEE as well as, approve this project and send it forward. But the small comments I just wanted to mention in case you did want to consider. And I will start with the small one on the back, the trash enclosure. And I'm not sure what to do there. And that's always one of those places where less is more, and generally I think, but I feel strongly that the wear and tear and kind of how it reads in terms of the heavy material and just what goes on in maintenance. I appreciate that you have that metal roof. It's black. I just wonder if maybe you might want to think about that fence, which is not a big fence, but it might want to be metal and black as well, or dark gray or something that is just clearly works with the metal canopy, so they aren't at odds. It's a small comment. The other piece that I do want to point out, though, because it's so lovely, is your A3.0. So I keep going to A3.0, and the existing building is very long, and it's a huge improvement what you're doing. I keep going back to those blue stripe of the existing, but now what we have is when I look at this building, I think about the 5 kind of base, right, in terms of the length, and marching down that facade and then turning the corner, and yet again there's even more. And so when I first went there, I thought, gosh, that feather white, it's really going to be a lot of area, and there might be some glare and it might be too bright. So I'm on the fence there, and I just wanted to throw it out again. I know I often react to the paint colors like feather white, where there's a lot of area and then there's sun and it might be a little bit bright. So I just wanted to offer that. The other piece that I wanted to mention is what I see at A3.0 is that the smaller trees, and now, there aren't going to be 4. And there really isn't room for 4. I understand. There's going to be 2. Well, I think the maybe it's not 4, maybe it's 3. Actually, will work better with the rhythm of that long facade on the front on Middlefield. And so, I definitely appreciate the landscape. Thank you for your comment in terms of the move away from this rendering. I understand seasonal color and deciduous and the need for these drought tolerant plants, but I just wanted to throw out there's grasses and these shrubs that line the walkway on either side, but I keep coming back to A3.0. I'm hopeful that you might consider 3 trees rather than 2, and something that actually works with that long facade along Middlefield that breaks the scale of that long kind of building. The other piece that I wanted to mention was about the sign, and my colleague, board member Lou, the sign I think is fine. It's a monument sign. But again, when I look at that long building and I think of its placement, I understand, and I understand rotating might affect some of the plants. But I'm just thinking my experience, if this is going to be a medical building and its orientation with the parking and driving my daughters to orthodontist appointments and medical appointments and pedestrian wayfinding as well as vehicular and the scale of where we are on Middlefield. And I think it's better along the parking lot side where the existing was on the other side of the walkway. I think rotating it would also be a terrific possibility. So those are my small comments, and I thank you for bringing this forward. I can pass it on to Chair Osma.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lee. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for this application. I'm going to go right in and comment on the shades that Board Member Hirsch brought up. Truthfully, those are like the main thing I like about this facade. So maybe we differ there. In fact, I would actually, one of my comments here, which is one of those kind of pushing you a little bit more, maybe unnecessarily, is I would push even more like diagonals. I understand that this comes from like an orthogonal partie, but I really like that the shades offer this diagonal, and with stucco you have this opportunity to do diagonals, and I would kind of recommend kind of pushing it even more aesthetically, of like maybe your seams aren't all orthogonal, maybe there's some finesse there that might be really interesting. So yeah, so I really like the eyelids. I like that it provides this kind of it gives this little kind of shape to it, whereas I think if it were all orthogonal, I'd probably be less interested in this facade. And so moving on to some of the other things that were brought up, so for the roof enclosure, for the corrugated roof enclosure, I've been trying to decide if it would show up in this view or not. I kind of go back and forth. I think though with the height, maybe it would a little bit. And part of me worries if it's too shiny, it might bring a lot of attention to itself. So potentially that's a subcommittee item. I've heard from 2 other board members about the trash enclosure maybe being a subcommittee item. There's some concerns. I also have concerns, maybe kind of on the other side of Vice Chair Lee, that the fence is all wood and then the most of the enclosure is wood, and then you have this metal, canopy, that the metal canopy seems to be the incongruous thing. And so I do have some concerns about the trash enclosure, and maybe that's something that could go to subcommittee. I support a lot of the comments that have been made about landscape. I support Board Member Hirsch's comments about operable windows. I feel like in this day and age, it's a good idea to have that. A lot of comments about the sign being okay either way. And I hate to be kind of flippy floppy, I'm like, okay, it can be either way. I do think, yeah, for cars, having it rotated makes sense. And because it's such a big sign, maybe that's one of its main reasons. But again, I don't know that I feel that strongly about that item. But otherwise, I can recommend support for this project with a few items going to subcommittee. I think also Board Member Balte's comment about the door and exiting. I'd be interested to see how that is resolved further. So those are my comments. Discussion.
Osma, can I have 2 questions about your comments and Grace's. Can I ask those, please?
Yeah.
Grace, you were talking about the trees in the front of the facade, and it caused me to look at the planting plan more carefully. And I guess I'm just not reading this right, but in the beautiful rendering we're all talking about, I see 4 what look like crepe myrtles on the applicant's property in front of the building. On the planting plan, I seem to see 2 trees. Uh,
Yes.
Can you refine for me what your comment was? And maybe the applicant should clarify what's really going to be proposed.
Oh, I think, yes, and I'll let the applicant respond, but I believe that it's as shown in the L 3.1 plan. And I guess I'm gravitating more towards more trees in front, and I understand the seasonal color may not be possible. The decision to move away from, a red bud, but I was just trying to make the plug for 3 trees.
And I guess I want to be clear what Randy, you and your team, what's proposed is 2 crepe myrtles right now. Is that right?
Oh, I don't think they're crepe myrtles.
What
I
are
don't
they?
know no, I don't know where the crepe myrtle idea came from. They're not California natives, so you're not going to see them on the site. They're Parkinsonias, which are fairly open trees. But if you look at the canopies of the existing street trees, we don't want to be planting more trees that have some size under the canopies of the existing trees. We thought it was better to have a sort of a symmetrical arrangement of the trees in kind of the area where they have open, or they're open to the sky, and not just think about it from a plan layout perspective. So that's why there's 2 trees now, because these trees are a little bit bigger scale, but they're fairly open trees, so that they're not going to provide a solid barrier of leaves. So the building will still have some visibility, but I think we get the scaling effect of the trees, and that's why we did it the way we did it. Previously, it was 4 small scale redbud trees, and now it's 2 larger scale trees.
So the rendering is not 100% here then, is that right?
The rendering is sort of showing the previous plan before we responded to the city's comments about, or Danielle's comments specifically about the tree arrangement. Yes.
Okay, and Grace, you think we should ask for 3 trees in that frontage?
I don't feel strongly. I don't want to, hold up the applicant moving forward. I understand my issue is the scale. And so, the explanation of 2, which will open broad and,
They're bigger scale trees.
Building.
Okay, I just want to be sure
I would love 3 trees. However, this is not something to hold up the applicant.
It seems like it's either 2 or 4 because of the symmetry. Am I missing something here though?
Yeah, I think there's, and for the applicant's response, I definitely understand the shade issue in terms of street trees and growing small trees underneath and the desire for drought tolerant. I just was looking, we look so much at these renderings, which are try to give the experience. And I'm just reacting to the length of that facade and how the landscape might bring the scale down.
Okay, I'm reacting to your comments, and I always like to respect what you're saying. It's very valuable. Osma, could you clarify for me? I'm just confused. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by diagonals on the facade regarding these eye shades. I'm trying to parse out what you and David are saying.
Yeah, so if we're looking at this rendering, here I'll mark it up. So these shading devices have these side elements that kind of diagonal in. And I think David might have been reacting to, everything else is orthogonal. So maybe this seems a little out of place. And I'm reacting on the other way, that I really like the diagonal. And I would really encourage the applicant to do more cool seams, because you can, with stucco. And I understand it might not be the partie. I understand, whatever. I just want to push the applicant to embrace this, because I think for me it's the strongest part of the design.
I want to weigh in here, because a good bit of my reaction on that is that it wasn't very strong, and so you made me rethink it, Ozma, and I could come around to your way of thinking if it were more prominent.
Okay, I just wanted to understand what everybody's saying. I think Randy's done other buildings in town where we have these thin eyebrows over the windows, and they're quite successful, I'd say. So I think it's fair to respect his judgment on these things, with or without the diagonals. As an architect's detail, I would leave to him. So, but I appreciate hearing everybody's input. So that's my piece of this discussion, Osmo.
So just if I could just continue for a little bit, I think it's an opportunity that if you're going to use the diagonal, and you're going to use it asymmetrically as you are, then you really have to make something more out of it. And maybe the top piece of it gets heavier and the side piece is different. You know, it's a design element, as Ozma says. It really kind of makes the facade. So it's something I think you should make more of it. Especially the diagonal piece of it relative to what the top would look like. It's a detail that demands a little more thinking.
Are there any comments from any other board members? I see Randy has his hand up. But I just want to give the other board members a chance to weigh in on any other items or this item. Nothing. Okay.
I have comments about the findings, but maybe let's finish discussion of the building first.
Okay. So Randy, we normally, I guess, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a quick thing to add?
I do. I want to just address the eyebrows really very briefly. And I will say that it's our goal to get a recommendation here and to not get back to subcommittee. So I'm happy to try and resolve this quickly rather than going through a whole nother round with staff and everybody. We've been at this for almost 2 years. And so we'd really like to get this done. The eyebrow vents, the eyebrows on the building are intentionally limited. I'm so hesitant to go into this, but there is a special setback on Middlefield Road. And part of our limitation is to not increase the nonconformity of the building. We're doing something that's adding windows that has a bit of a piece on it that projects. And so we're trying to seek a balance between adding some character and something that's got some interest without doing something that's overly dramatic. And I will just offer that, you know, my architectural instinct on this building is not to add some diagonals that are not related to the architecture, but are just sort of applied to the building. I think I'm trying to be very respectful of kind of the orientation of the windows and the rectilinear forms that are here. And adding those eyebrows was just a very subtle gesture to add a little bit of interest and something that has a little bit of flair. And then on the trash enclosure, just really briefly, we would be happy to paint the base of that to match the base of the building if that makes it seem more compatible. We thought that letting the cedar gray out over time would do that. But if you'd prefer to see it painted, and we could avoid subcommittee by addressing a couple of these items with some direction from all of you, we're happy to be flexible about that, but would really prefer not to have another round if we can help it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion within the board?
I hadn't talked about the trash enclosure, but I agree with Randy that the wood texture would gray out. I'll be using some cedar in my house and it does gray out after a period of time. And it's nice to have a little bit more natural texture towards the perimeter of the site as it will relate nicer to the planting, and the building materials, you know, are still hard-edged, kind of different kind of look to it, so that the trash enclosure having a bit of wood look, I think would be useful and aesthetically appropriate. But I disagree with Randy in terms of being so modest about the eyebrows. I agree more with Ozma that that requires some emphasis, and subcommittee isn't a big deal coming back to it, and I don't see where any city problem will develop for increasing the dynamics of the eyebrows.
I see Vice Chair Lee has a comment.
Sorry, I'll just clarify. My comments were not, the target was not subcommittee. I was just ready to approve and just wanted to offer some comments, but have confidence that they can move it forward. So I just wanted to be, I don't think I said that in my comments, but my intention was not to go to subcommittee.
I can support that as well. When I listened to David's comments about the trash enclosure and letting the wood fade out, I'm fine with it the way it is. I can recommend approval without sending the trash enclosure to subcommittee. And I guess with all respect, Osman, David, I think these eyebrows are just about right. They're not too big, they're not too small. They add some character, a little bit of functionality. I'm very happy with them the way they are. So my remaining issue, Osman, if I can dive into it, is with the findings, the way they're written in the pamphlet right now.
Okay, yep.
Maybe Jody, I should get your attention on this, but these seem just overly wordy and inconsistent and just not very well put together. So I can give you a couple of examples, but I'm not sure if you shouldn't pay more attention to them. On finding number 2, the first 5 or 10 lines all relate to the landscaping. Really seems to me that the last 3 sentences really are just all you need to say, beginning with the continued grandfather. No, I'm sorry. I'm even having a hard time finding where I'm. On finding number 2, there's a sentence that says the continued grandfathered use of medical office is consistent with the adjacent land uses. That's really finding number 1. Why is it consistent with the general plan? Finding number 2 is, actually, I don't quite see that supported here. Finding number 3, again, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 sentences just regurgitate the design. The last sentence where it says the proposed materials and colors are compatible with existing buildings, etc. That's what it is. So I'm just reading through this. It seems to me that it could use an editing to be more clear. Then on the 4th finding, it says that the ground level parking is convenient and access to the building is primary through the exterior court. Well, convenient parking is hardly cause for making one of these findings. And I think we just need to be more careful how we put all this together. So I don't know if I have support on the board, but I'd like to see somehow this get tightened up. I don't know how that affects us today because it's really not the applicant's issue, but that's what I think.
Board Member Balte, how would you like to see it fixed? Would you like to have another draft that we review?
No, I think we need to approve this today. So I don't know, maybe I'm just complaining, but I'd like to see what everybody else thinks about the way these findings are written. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive. I get that way sometimes.
Are there any comments from other board members about this? Go for it, Board Member Liu.
Yeah, Peter, actually, I had the same reaction to the findings as you did. So I think we can actually just include that in the motion to edit the findings. And so I would suggest making a motion with the findings modified.
And just say edit them without anything specific?
No, I think we can be specific about deleting and moving items on there. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, it was clear to me when I was reading through them that things should be moved. So I don't see it being too complicated.
Okay, let's take a stab at it. So can we make a motion, Osman? Are we ready for that?
Yeah, we can.
I'll move that we recommend approval of this project as submitted. I would like to recommend, I move that we restructure the findings as follows. This is hard to do over Zoom, but and Alex helped me out here. The sentence in the second finding that says the continued grandfathered use ending with adjacent residential uses should be finding number 1, should support finding number 1.
If I may, there's some information before that about context-based design criteria that does need to be in that second finding.
That's fine.
But we can take out sort of the first half and refine that.
Okay, you're talking finding 1 or finding 2?
Finding 2.
Okay, let's go one at a time, Jody. On finding number 1, the design is consistent with the zoning code to as much extent as possible. I just think that the continued grandfathered use is consistent with adjacent land uses. That's what the finding is. And I don't know, how do you put it in, it's compatible with current code, isn't it?
So the continued grandfather use is compatible. Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get the exact language, but I certainly understand the concept.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And frankly, it just seems to me that this hasn't been fully edited yet, and I think it needs to be around. So finding number 2 then, the whole part on the first page of the packet is about landscaping. So that really should be moved to the landscaping section.
So yeah, I mean, there's desirable environment. I mean, but we can certainly minimize the landscaping part of things.
It looks to me that in finding number 5, which is the landscaping side, the stuff is repeated there.
Okay.
That's generally where we put issues about landscaping design, is in finding number 5, and the design easily meets that finding. We just need to say it there. Finding number 3, I recommend that the last 2 sentences, beginning with the proposed materials, ending with building in the 21st century, should be the supporting the finding. All the stuff before it should get struck out.
Understood.
I'm just reading finding number 4 now. Alex, are you able to chime in with some of this?
Yeah, I'm just rereading it at the moment.
I guess my thought on finding number 4 was that the first sentence, no changes to the layout of the building or function as proposed. That's fine. The last sentence talks about adding a new ADA lift, which is kind of a change to the function of the building. So that's inherently contradictory. I think just leave the first sentence and call it at that. No changes to the layout of the building or function are proposed. Well, that's it.
Well, or we could take out that one and just leave everything else.
As long as we can remove the word convenient, I think that's a terrible precedent to start establishing.
Oh, I see your point.
Convenience as a means of complying with the required findings. Jody, are you comfortable just reworking that without more detail?
Yeah, it feels like the first and last sentence should sort of be combined together somehow. I mean, there's minimal changes to the property.
Yeah, exactly. On the landscaping thing, I'm sorry, I can't do this that quickly on the fly, but I think 2 sentences of explanation why the landscaping complies with our code is appropriate.
Well, and I think that first sentence is most important, that this is native and adaptive native landscaping.
Yeah. So I think I'm happy if you guys can actually just wordsmith that correctly.
And I mean, the rest of it is talking about the additional trees that are being planted. So I guess do we not want that sort of detail and just let the plans speak for themselves?
That's traditionally how we've done it, isn't it? I mean, this is supposed to be a summary of why it complies. The idea is to write something that's concise enough and quick enough that it supports what we've discussed, and is also a good thing for the record. And all the detail just hurts it, I think.
Okay.
And number 6, yeah, this is fine. Number 6 is fine. That's my motion.
Just edits to the.
Edits to the finding. The rest of it, I have no changes to the building itself.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I will second.
Before going there, can I add a friendly amendment?
Well, after it's been seconded, you can propose that, and it's fine with.
I think I heard it was seconded by Vice Chair Lee.
Okay.
But
Friendly
what is
amendment
the
would be for the architect to investigate the detail and look of the eyebrow sunshades on the second floor without the need to come back to committee.
So just to recommend that they consider alternate designs?
Yes, on their own, explore that possibility.
David, I don't know what we're saying, though, David. I mean, I suppose it doesn't matter. It's fine, but in what direction? What should they respond to? What are we asking him to do?
We're asking him for them to recognize concerns, some of our concerns, let's put it that way, for a more emphasis on the eyebrow window shades on the second floor of the building.
So to consider alternates on the eyebrow designs, that gives it more emphasis?
Yes.
Wait, I have a question. Why would we ask them to do that if it doesn't come back to us?
Because then they can make their own decision as to whether it works or it doesn't work.
I'm not sure I see the point.
Well, you did agree that you thought it could be more important, more impressive than what it is. So I'm reinforcing this idea by saying that the architect should explore that on their own.
Yeah, but my comment was to keep the eyebrows and explore it elsewhere.
Your comment was to?
My comment was that the eyebrows were the strongest part of the
Yes.
design.
Yes, I agreed. I agreed with you. You've convinced me.
So why would we ask them to reconsider it?
No, I would like them to, because your proposal was to emphasize the diagonal even more, which would mean that they would emphasize the top even more as well. So I agree that that is the important design aspect of the building, and that it should be further explored by the architect on their own without coming back to committee.
And Ozma, if we go with that, is that going to lose your vote on this thing?
I don't know, it's weird. It's because this one item that I think is the strongest part, we're letting the applicant know that they can change it without our review. I think it's a little dangerous. I don't think I would agree with that.
Okay, David, I'm afraid I can't accept that as a friendly. So you can vote. I'm going to call your bluff if you're going to vote this one down because of that.
I didn't say I was voting it down.
That's my goal, is to get us. So I'm sorry, that's not a friendly amendment in my opinion. Grace, you can.
Actually, I think, Peter.
Yes.
The friendly amendment needs a second before it gets voted up or down.
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm asking Grace what her.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And I think whoever makes the motion can decide, no, I don't accept that friendly amendment. That's normally how we roll. So, and as a second, I don't accept it.
Okay, so David, I'm sorry, but you can put it forth as an unfriendly amendment, and I believe we would vote on it then. If you have a second for that, right? Ozma, you're in charge, figure it out.
And is there a second? If this was, I guess David hasn't tried as an unfriendly, but I don't see anybody that would second it, at least at this time.
It died.
I'm sorry, David.
Board Member Hirsch. Are there any other discussion items? Does anyone want to try and put anything through subcommittee? I guess the trash enclosure was one of those things, but is there any comments about looking at that more? Doesn't look like it. There's also a comment about the color being too bright by Vice Chair Lee. Is there any other comments about that? Okay. Shall we take a vote?
Board Member Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee,
Yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion carries 5-0.
thank you. Thank you to the applicant. Let's move on.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is approval of minutes. So I'm gonna try and just go through this because it's only 10:30 and normally we're only halfway through our agenda. All right, we need a motion to review the meeting minutes or to approve the meeting minutes of July 15th. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for July 15th, 2021.
Second.
All right, motion by Lou, seconded by Hirsch. Any discussion before you vote? Not seeing any. Go ahead, let's do a vote.
Board Member Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee,
Yes.
Board Member Lou,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yeah.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Our last item is the NVCAP working group updates.
So it's on hold pending a council decision. And I will just mention that the council did hear a pre-screening for a planned community at 280 and 300 Lambert Avenue, which is within the NVCAP area. It generally got a favorable review. The project is 49 units with 20% affordable units, and it consists of stacked townhouses along the street with a more conventional apartment flat type of building along the rear of the property. The project architect is Hayes Group. They are proposing to go over the height limit, so they were designing it at 55 feet. So generally a favorable review from the council. The council did ask for more stepping to the massing. So we'll see what happens. The council, when you go for a pre-screening, no action is taken. So there's no binding decision. And that's all that I've got on that, on NVCAP.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions, or announcements?
Just Chair Thompson, we do have the retreat on the 9th at 10 a.m. And so if there were other topics that board members were interested, now would be a great time.
Yeah, and I will say for the discussion questions that we'll send you guys tomorrow, those kind of came out of a lot of the study sessions that we were engaged, board member Hirsch and I were engaging in as part of finalizing the objective standards. So it's a lot of questions and it might be a little overwhelming and we probably won't get to all of them, but I would love to start having those conversations with this group next week. And then Jody, the retreat will be virtual, correct?
Yes, it will be virtual on Zoom starting at 10 a.m. So it is a different time as well because the HRB will be holding their meeting at 8:30 in the morning. So we'll start at 10.
Okay.
And sorry, no boxed lunch or any of that because we are virtual. So. But
Yeah.
we will definitely try for the second round because like I said, we're doing the awards. This first part of the awards is just kind of making sure which buildings are complete and kind of what the possible projects are, and maybe going around and taking some pictures. So I think we can do that successfully on Zoom. But the second one, second ARB awards meeting will need some more back and forth. And so if as much as possible. We'll try and do that in person.
Will we have a list of the potential award-winning projects ahead of time to check out ourselves?
Yes, I have a grand list. I'm trying to whittle it down a little bit. We'll see how far I can get, but yes, there will be a list to start from.
Because I'd like to be able to look at them in advance.
Yes, that'll be in the packet. So I need to finish that very quickly.
Thank you, Jody.
Cool. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.